And then I went to Detroit, and then I was in LA, and I finished in West Texas. And I'm sharing, and when I go places, I kind of gauge if it's a place where I want my family to be, right? If they can get up, give somebody a hug and tell them you love them, I think that's a beautiful thing. It doesn't matter where I'm sharing, I try to always do this. Only place I don't do this at is middle schools though, okay? Because middle school, the hormones are going crazy and middle schoolers are wild. Plus, I don't know if you guys remember being in middle school, you got kids in middle school, but everybody's too cool. And I'll say at a middle school, I'll say, get up, man, give somebody a hug, tell them that you love them. And everybody kind of just stands up, they stand around like, man, I ain't doing it, right? I'm too cool. But this one time I did it, and this kid broke the ice for me. I was so excited. Because I go to speak to 50,000 students a year. The way my calendar works is half of it's corporate, the other half I'm speaking to students. And I was at this middle school and I told everybody, get up, give somebody a hug, tell them that you love them. And all the kids stood up and did nothing. But one kid, he broke the ice for me, and this is what he did. He stood up and he locked eyes with his crush. And he ran over to his crush, his arms were super wide, and he was like, I love you. And she was like, boy, if you don't get out of my face. And she did that. But other than that, I try to do this every single time because I have this mission of love and of unity. Like Kelly mentioned, I lost my hero, who was a track coach. She was a children's church pastor, and she was my biggest fan because I used to play baseball. And after my mom was killed, I said, I can't bring my mom back. What I can try to do is be the exact opposite of my mother's killer. Right? This guy was 21 years young. He walked into my church with hate in his heart and murder on his mind. And he took 9 lives, 9 beautiful people who were killed at my church during Bible study. And I said, I can't bring my mom back. What I can try to do is, if his mission was to divide us in this country and our city, I can be the opposite and love people everywhere that I go and spread that love and make them do awkward stuff like getting up and giving somebody a hug and telling them that you love them. And so thank you guys for doing that for me. Right, I want to share a quick story. Usually when I share the entrepreneurial, the business type of audience, I love to share this story. And earlier today, I got the opportunity to share with CTAR's got a commercial investment division, right? And they had their monthly meeting, and they asked me to share today, and I did. But I want to share this particular story with you guys. One of the things that I pride myself on, I was even talking to my mother-in-law about it in the car, is like, I love my wife so much that I am scared, I am terrified. This is like one of my biggest fears. One of my biggest fears is that I will bring my wife to hear me speak one day. And this is what I call a public success, but a private failure. This is something I'm so scared of. I'm so scared that I'm not loving my wife the way that I should be. And I'll come to bring her to my speech. And I finish up. Everybody's like, man, Chris is so amazing. Oh my gosh, he's such a great speaker. Isn't he amazing? Y'all, my biggest fear is that my wife will look at them and she'll say, maybe he's an amazing speaker, but he's not an amazing dad, and he's not an amazing husband. That's my biggest fear. That's what you call a public success and a private failure. And I've realized in my life, a lot of times, especially as men, what we say is we want to provide for our family and take care of our family. And I realized my son, I took him to see the Hawks play. And ever since I was a kid, I had a dream of sitting courtside at a game. Anybody ever done that before? You sat courtside at a game? Nobody's done that. One person's done that before. That was like my dream of doing that. Right? I grew up in Atlanta, so I wanted to do that for my son. I took my son to a Hawks game. We're sitting courtside. It's the coolest thing in the world for me, right? He was just like, I'm at a game with my dad. Had a phenomenal time. We're right behind the bench. It was amazing. And then I took my son to another game, another Hawks game. We're in the nosebleeds this time. And I'm thinking to myself, man, how do I show my son being on the court next to all the players, and the next time I'm in the nosebleeds with him? After we left that game, when we're in the nosebleeds, my son said, Dad, this is the best game I've ever been to in my life. Thinking to myself, what do you mean the best game you ever been to in your life? Dude, a month ago we were sitting courtside. What are you talking about? He said, well, Dad, Trae Young hit 6 threes in the first quarter. And he said, I had my uncle, my brother Caleb, and he said, I had my Auntie Cam, my sister, there with me. And that moment I said, man, it wasn't about sitting courtside with my little man. It was about being there and hanging out with him. And I heard this story, and I want to share this story because at a certain point in our lives, we have to realize what success looks like to us. And success to me is 5 things. Every year I want to make $1 million in a year. I want my wife to love me, my kids to love me. I want to be a man of faith. I want to be a giver. I don't want to be stingy. and I want to be physically fit. Those are my 5 things, Nick, right? And I was speaking to an organization, bunch of successful people. And I said, if anybody's got all 5, I want you to come up after and talk to me. Nobody came up afterwards and said they got all 5. One guy said, you know what, Chris, I've got 4 of them, but as you can see, I'm kind of chubby, so I don't got that physically fit thing, right? But I heard that and it put perspective on what success looks like for me. And I want to share this story. It's called the Mexican fisherman proverb. It's a beautiful story. If you haven't heard it, I guarantee you won't forget it after I share it. Where the story goes, there's this very successful businessman, right? He's working himself to death. He's working super hard. And his doctor says to him, he says, hey man, your health is declining, like you got to take a break. I'm not asking you to. Your health is declining. You have to take a break. Guy says, no, I got this really important board meeting. I can't take a break. He said, I got this really important stuff coming up. I can't do it. The doctor said, listen, I'm not asking you. I'm telling you, I'm seeing your health declining. You're working too hard. You're going to die. So finally he says, you know what? I'm going to listen to my doctor. He goes on vacation. And when he goes to the middle of nowhere, Mexico. When he gets there, he's anxious. I'm 28 years young. And so if I don't have my phone on me, I get a little anxious too. So I know that feeling. And so he's anxious. He gets a call from the office. He answers his phone. He said, hey, listen, I can't work. My doctor said I have to take this vacation. Hangs up the phone. He leaves the fire back at the office. It's still blazing, right? Guy calls him again. He just turns off his phone. Now he's anxious. And he's walking. And as he's walking, he goes to like this little pier where there's this small boat. And there's a Mexican fisherman doing his thing, right? And he goes to the guy and he finds that he has a yellowfin tuna. Now I don't fish. I don't know if a yellowfin tuna is a good catch. If it's small, if it's big, I know it's bad. I don't even know what tuna looks like, to be honest with you, right? But apparently this is a good catch. And he asked the guy, he said, hey man, how long did it take you to catch the yellowfin tuna? My man said, not too long, about 15 minutes. He said, wow, man, how many are you gonna catch today? He said, I'm done for the day. He said, what do you mean you're done for the day? You work 15 minutes, you're done for the day? He said, yeah, man, I got enough for me. I got enough for my family. He said, I'm done for the day. He said, okay, well, I'm a very successful businessman back in the States. Can I give you some pointers? Mexican fisherman said, absolutely, man. What you got for me? He said, first, I know you probably got a pretty boring life. If you work 15 minutes a day and then you're done. The guy said to him, quite the contrary, man. I got a beautiful life. It's a full life. What I do is I'll wake up in the morning. I'll fish a little bit. After that, I'll have lunch with my kids. I go on a dinner date with my wife, and I'll drink some wine and play guitar and sing with my friends at night. I got a full life, is what he said. Very successful businessman said, that's pretty cool, but listen, I run a big company back in the States. Let me give you some pointers. First thing you gotta do, man, you're working 15 minutes a day. That's not it. You gotta work 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 hours a day if you wanna be successful. Mexican fisherman said, okay, cool, well then what? What's next? He said, after you work all that time, you'll get you more fish, man. You caught that in 15 minutes. Imagine what you can do in 15 hours. He said, okay, cool. He said, well, what's next? He said, after you catch more fish, you'll buy a bigger boat. The guy was like, oh man, that's pretty cool. I'll buy a bigger boat, stay on there longer, have more lines, cast more lines, catch more fish. Beautiful. He said, well, what's next? He said, after that, you can buy a fleet of ships and run this big company like I do. He said, man, you know what? That sounds amazing. Well, what's next? He said, then you can move to the States. When he said move to the States, his eyes lit up. I don't think we realize how blessed and fortunate we are to live in the States. People want to come here every single day, and we take for granted where we live. And so his eyes lit up, and he said, well, that's amazing. What's next? He said, then you can sell your company, or it can go public, and you'll make a ton of money. Millions and millions of dollars. He said, man, this sounds amazing. What's next? And how long will this take? He said 10, 15, 20, 30 years max. I was like, all right, I guess 30 years, but man, that's a lot of money. Okay, what's next? A very successful businessman said this. He said, next is the coolest part. What happens is after you sell your company, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move to the middle of nowhere, Mexico. I'm gonna wake up in the morning and fish a little bit. I'm gonna go have lunch with my kids. Hopefully my wife still loves me, whether it's my first wife, my fourth wife. Dinner with my wife. And if I can still sing, man, hopefully I'll go drink some wine and sing with my friends and play guitar at night. Mexican fisherman said, hey, that's what you're shooting for? He said, yeah, man, I can't wait to get there. He looked at him, he said, if that's what success is to you, he said, I'm already living it. And I thought that was a beautiful, beautiful story I will never forget. Because as I shared with my mother-in-law in the car, my wife, who I've been with since I was 15 years old, not only did she say, Chris, I love you, I've got 3 kids by you, but also my mother was killed and my father passed away. My little brother and sister, they moved into our house. And while I'm playing baseball for 8 months on the road, my wife is at home with my little brother and sister, taking care of them, taking care of our son. And it would pain me so much for me to turn into that guy that's very successful with a big company in the States, but I don't know what real success is with my family, my wife, and my 3 beautiful kids. I share that because I know there's somebody in here that needs that story, that's going through something at home. And in my life, it reminds me to keep perspective on what's important. The mindset that I have today is a mindset that no matter what happens to me, I can't control what happens, but I can always control my response. The reason why I can see my life going through trauma, like I lost both of my parents, my mom literally being killed because of a chemical in her skin, the same chemical that makes me the color that I am today, the same chemical that unfortunately people judge people on, they hate people on, based on something we don't control. After I lost my mom and lost my father, I went searching. I've been a man of faith my whole life, but there's a difference between having faith because your parents believe and having faith when you need it yourself. And I've been a man of faith. What I used to do is I would actually look up stuff, look up scriptures, look up different stuff on YouTube, motivational, and some of the stuff would aggravate me. One of the quotes that I used to hate, it said, sometimes in life, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. You ever heard that before? That's so stupid to me, if you ask me, right? Doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I hate that quote. It's too cliche. Another one said, this is one that makes my skin crawl. It said, sometimes in life, you got to play the hand that you're dealt. You ever heard that before? I hated that one too, because if you got a good hand, that's a great quote for you, right? If you got a good hand, it's like, oh man, the market crashed, but I got 15 million in cash sitting in the bank. Man, I'm gonna play the hand that I got. Easy for you to say when you say it like that. But for somebody that's struggling, trying to figure things out, I hated that quote. But there was one that I shaped my life around. This guy named Charles Swindle. He's a pastor out in Texas. And he said in life is 2 things. He said it's action and reaction. Everybody's life is 10% action. That's the stuff that we don't choose, we don't control. And it's 90% reaction. What that means is our 10% is where we were born, didn't choose that. The 10% is how much our parents did or didn't have growing up. We didn't choose that. The 10% is if you're 6'7" or 4'7", we don't choose that, right? The 10% is the stuff that we simply don't control. That's the 10%. The 90% is how do I respond to the things that I simply don't control? And this mindset changed my life because I finally said, you know what? My dad was a good dad. The reason why my father passed up with my mom, because my dad couldn't put the bottle down. He's an alcoholic, non-functioning alcoholic. And so what do? I promised my family, my brother, my sister, my wife, my kids, I will never be an alcoholic. That's my 90%. My 10% was unfortunately that my mom, my hero, was murdered during Bible study by a self-proclaimed white supremacist. As bad as that is, that's my 10%. My 90% is dedicating my life to being the opposite of my mother's killer, traveling all across this country, reminding people, because somewhere along the lines we forgot that we don't choose our first language. We don't choose our skin color. We don't even choose our name. Somebody gave us our name. But yet our privilege sometimes allows us to believe, man, if it's not what I believe or what I think, it shouldn't matter. And that's not the case. And so my 90% is sharing that all across this country and the world. My 10% was after my mother was killed. Our house went into foreclosure. Didn't know what that meant, y'all. I'm 18 years old. I was privileged. I was so privileged. I didn't even know that car insurance was mandatory. My mom was killed. I'm like, I'm not keeping no car insurance. I know how to drive. Why would I have car insurance? I don't need that. I didn't know you had to have it, right? I was blessed with a good mom, read to me at night as a kid. My 10% was there was a guy who came in. He was a nice guy. After the house was foreclosed on, he said, hey, I heard about your story, man. This is real life. This is real life story with me. Heard about your story. I just actually bought the house that you guys had from the bank. And he said, I see that you have washer and dryer in here. Is there any chance you still want this, man? There's some furniture left and right in here, man. I know about your story. Would you like it? I said, absolutely. Thank you for hitting me up. Thank you for finding me and giving me that furniture and the washer and dryer. It means a lot to my family. We need it, especially during this time when we don't know what's next. My 10% was that guy bought the house for, I believe, $90,000. A year later, he put it on the market. I think he put it on the market for $255,000. And I saw that and I thought to myself, what in the world just happened? That's my 10%. You know what I said? I said, you know what my 90 is? I want to make sure I can find out everything that I can about real estate, because I don't want to feel this way like I don't know what the heck just happened ever again. So I listened to every single episode of Bigger Pockets. I listened to every single episode. On YouTube, I went to YouTube University. I watched every single video I could. I asked a million questions to a million people. When I got drafted by the Cubs, and I took my mom's life insurance, my signing bonus, I got us our first house in Moncks Corner. That's the only place where I could afford a house. And then when I started making money from speaking, I said, I don't want to blow this money. I want to start buying some stuff. I started buying some properties, bought my first duplex 2018. I bought a couple more. Now me and my wife, we've got 23 properties. One of them that we're selling. I tried to be a flipper like yo, and I'm about to probably only make like $3,000 on it. Yeah, it's a tough one. Dan knows. I was like, yo, what in the world is going on with this one, right? But what I say to my wife is, you know what, man, I didn't control the fact that somebody came in and bought our house, and it is what it is. That's life. I didn't know. He just bought it from the bank. But my 90% was, I never want to feel this way ever again. My 90% is now, with our tenants, we don't have a property manager. I said, hey, I'm going to make sure it's nice enough that my family would live there. If you got a problem, hit my wife up. She manages all of our stuff. My 90% is now I have guys like Corey, one of my tenants, who's blind and literally said, Chris, this is the first Christmas I've ever had where I don't have something leaking in my house. Now I have tenants, one refugee from Afghanistan that literally was on those planes as they were leaving, trying to get a better life for his family. And a church literally said, hey, Chris, I'm going to pay for their rent for a year and a half. Like now I have these stories because of my 90%. If it's based on my 10, I should be on the side of the road with a bottle complaining about how hard life is. How hard it is, because I can tell you it has been really, really tough to me. But instead of saying that, I said, you know what? I got 90% to work with. And I promised my mom, my family, that I was going to take care of them, whether I was playing in the major leagues or whether I'm trying to make it as a presenter, as a speaker, as a real estate investor back in my hometown. I promised my family I was going to do something great with my 90. And so my challenge to you all today is that we don't control our 10. We don't control interest rates. We don't control so many different things that happen in the world. We don't choose, we don't control it. But every single one of us can take our 90% by the reins, and we can create the life that we want to have for our families and for ourselves. Last thing we'll do today is I told you I got this mission of unity. And this is what will tell me if we're united in here. I call it a unity clap. Everybody say unity clap. One more time, say unity clap. Okay, this will tell me if we're united. I'm gonna count to 3. You clap 2 times together, okay? If we can clap 2 times together, that means that we're united. If you had a couple too many drinks, don't do it. Just sit this one out, okay? Everybody else, I'm gonna count to 3. We clap 2 times together in unison, as one community, as one accord. Let's do it together. Unity clap. 1, 2, 3. That's not bad. That's not bad. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I appreciate it.
My best friend who has a different color than Damascene over here helped me find some different people and that your mom meant a lot to.
Wow.
And so this is the letter from, I could not even read it because I got teary-eyed every single time, but she meant a lot to a lot of people.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Hey guys, ChrisSingleton.com has 6 books, has a tab to hit him up for public speaking, has a lot of things that you actually can look into about Chris. And so go to ChrisSingleton.com. He's wrote a ton of books, kids' books.
Yeah, kids' books, because they're only 32 pages. They're easier. That's why I write a lot of kids' books. That's why I do it that way.
So his mom is Sharonda, meant a lot to different people. It's a track athlete. It hits home because I was a college athlete and I was a high school athlete. And so she meant a lot to a lot of people. And so with the help of Wendy, I was able to find a few people. And I know that 9 years goes past, and you probably don't get as much as that as you used to get. So, use that and see what that makes you feel like tonight, and share it with your wife and your kids, okay?
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you for doing that. Thank you.